like everybody else. But see, me and Lamilton, we want to be different from normal. We want to be abnormal.
When I started the script for this video, it was going to be centered around a certain gay influencer, or rather a certain type of gay influencer, that being the normal gay. You've seen them before. They pride themselves on being respectful, polite, and sensible gays, unlike those pesky, loud on the left. Like me. They have ample smoke trans people, especially trans youth, that are in their view faking or not doing enough to pass. In particular, we're going to focus on this guy Brad or this guy Amir, but that felt a bit simplistic and non-educational, kind of like Brad's content. While I could focus on a certain creator, they're just one of many, and focusing the video on a particular one kind of misses the point and flattens a much more complex discussion we should be having in regards to the normal gay. You can't see me, but I'm doing finger quotes. So instead, we'll be discussing how these normal gays assist in what's called homonationalism. And perhaps more crucially, we'll be theorizing or arguing that trans is a new gay. I'll also explain that statement if you're confused by it. Sources in the description. Let's start with a recent book by a concerned Christian that claims to expose the goals of gender ideology. Gender ideology has its primary aim to trump the rights of all other groups, especially those of people of faith. The saddest part of the story is that it's working. In 2002, 37% of Americans believe transgender people should be protected under civil rights laws. By 2021, over 60%. America is not only becoming more tolerant of transgender identities through indoctrination of children, positive exposure in media, and the support and approval of corporate America, it is becoming less tolerant of those who disagree. But plot twist, this isn't about trans people, it's about gay people. 'Twas a farce, you see. Here's the actual quote from the book, The Gay Agenda. If it's not clear, my point is how neatly that switching of trans and gay fits in. And to hammer this point in, if you still think I'm reaching, this guy Alan Sears, the person who wrote The Gay Agenda, is one of the founding fathers of Alliance Defending Freedom, a group behind much of the recent anti-trans legislation across the US. They've shifted focus from the gays to trans people. The Gay Agenda has been replaced by gender ideology. The differences are slight but effective. Both allow for them to make people's identities into a matter of opinion while also taking a person out of discussion. You can say very critical things about an agenda or an ideology, but saying it about a person or people directly is a bit too on the nose. And let's distill this point even further. Take, for example, the statement, there are only two genders. Very 2016, I know, but just hear me out. This statement is targeting the trans person as fake, unnatural, or nonsensical. To me, the homophobic version of this is gay people can't reproduce. Both rely on shaky, pseudoscientific assumptions about the queer subject, implying queer existence is invalidated or disproven by this common sense science. Stay out of the bathrooms is, I don't care, just keep it in your home. Both imply that queerness is something indecent. Children shouldn't be mutilated is gay shouldn't adopt. Both come from a place of fear that the child may, God forbid, not hate gay people, or worse, become gay or trans. And most transparently, both share an implied or outright stated perversion towards children. But again, the shift in attention is what concerns us. Their new strategy is divide and conquer. Trans and gender identity are a tough sell, so focus on gender identity to divide and conquer. If we separate the T from the alphabet soup, we'll have more success. Kilganon identified a wide coalition of potential allies outside the Christian right. Her advice on how to draw them in is to explain that gender identity rights only come at the expense of others. Women, SA survivors, female athletes, ethnic minorities, economically challenged children, and children with anxiety disorders. You know, all groups they care deeply about. For Kilganon, an example of effective coalition building includes Hands Across the Aisle. It's pointed out that Hands Across the Aisle sent a letter to Ben Carson speaking out against the inclusion of trans women at women's shelters, and one of the co-signers of this letter is part of a group that tries to push out pseudoscience to link gay people to PDF files. Transphobia isn't homophobia, but transphobia is arguably exercised through a homophobic foundation. This isn't to say that transphobia isn't real, but more so to say that the transphobe doesn't think so. Many trans people are told to just be gay. The implication often is that they are gay and they're simply taking it too far. But the too far is essentially being too gay. But the idea of something being too gay is homophobic. So if the understanding is this extreme gayness, can we really say there's more gay acceptance? Does that make sense? Exactly why I use the term queer, because it includes all the rainbow troops. Focusing our acceptance on the gays also allows for what's called pinkwashing, where the state says, look at how woke and queer friendly we are, while it's more LGB friendly, and even then, only if you meet a certain criteria. Don't be poor and don't let us be able to tell you're queer. In the US, 2 of the first formally organized gay and lesbian rights organizations actively discourage members from engaging in, quote, deviant expressions of gender and sexuality. They fought against discrimination on the grounds that they were, quote, normal homosexuals, and trans people did not fit into this. These normal gays aren't new, but there's also more extreme versions of this. Confusingly, there's a history of queer fascism, or queer people getting involved with fascism, I guess. Now, there's something to be said about the use of homoeroticism to bond men. Some argue that the Nazis used this to appeal to the gays, but I think the appeal to the gays was more of a symptom. Don't quote me, I just be saying shit for real. In queer fascism, I learned that Mustache Guy's bestie, okay, we're gonna try to get this video not suppressed to hell, so we're gonna replace some names. Mustache Guy's bestie. Brad, we'll call him Brad. Brad was apparently gay. Brad was not a queer man who suddenly joined a homophobic political party in a fit of inexplicable, profound confusion. His views on sexual politics were, rather, comfortably within what in his day was a decades-old tradition of far-right queerness. Brad's queer fascism was identical to the party's ideology in almost all respects, save the questions of male-to-male eroticism. That was, however, a significant difference. Queer fascism wasn't mainstream fascism. The party's position on homosexuality was that it was dangerous, emasculating, and ought to be eradicated because it was promoted by the Jews in order to undermine the Aryan race. But Brad and others like him had a different view. They likely hated homosexuality as well, but to the rainbow fascists, homosexuality means male femininity, Marxism, and Judaism. They didn't have the gay, you see, it was something else entirely. A, quote, manly Eros that was spiritual rather than lustful, and was experienced discreetly among healthy and respectful fellows. History said they were roommates. Men will do everything but just be gay. Manly Eros was something fundamentally different from their view of homosexuality, a form of male-male eroticism associated with feminine men, gender crossing, and transvestism that, quote, violated the characteristics of their race. They wanted quiet accommodation, not public acceptance. Some thought that would even overlook a bit of gay in the barracks as long as the men did their duty, but this doesn't seem to check out. And today, Brad and his types have platforms. Queer fascists have been around for a while, and Brad is only one example. They help erase progress. Something many people don't know is the Weimar Republic had done more to advance queer rights than any other state at the time. The Republic had nearly repealed its sodomy law in 1929, and the US only got the scrapping is in 2003. Trans people could legally change their first name to a gender-neutral one in the 1920s in Germany, and the liberal haven New York City was still debating this into the early 2000s. You know, there was a gay community in Germany before the period, which had all the characteristics of the community we have now, including community centers, balls, newspapers, a scientific research institute, everything. I am struck by the ignorance among gay people about the past. More even than ignorance, the will to forget. More even than the ignorance is the will to forget the German gay holocaust. That we forgot about these hundreds of thousands of people, and about the fact that out of 100 years of gay life, in 30 of them, we had a virtual vacuum. That we forgot in such radical ways is, I think, something of a warning. We find ourselves beginning at zero in each generation. Our lesson from history then is that we can't be sure we won't be suppressed. But what does the normal gay have to do with this? I think today's normal gays are the far-right subjects of what's called homonationalism. Whether they themselves are far-right or center-moderate, they still follow a code similar to that of the queer fascists such as Brad. Simply stated, homonationalism is the rise in legal, consumer, and representative recognition of gay white subjects, while the curtailing of welfare provisions, immigrant rights, and the expansion of state power happen simultaneously. The narrative of progress for gay rights is built on the backs of racialized and sexualized others, for whom such progress was either once achieved but is now backsliding, or has yet to arrive. This relies on shoring up the respectability of homosexual subjects in relation to the performative reiteration of the pathologized, perverse sexuality of racialized others. Of course we oppose war on terror, but what about the homophobia of Muslims? Of course we oppose US occupation, but the Iranians keep hanging innocent gay men. Of course we support the revolution in Egypt, but the sexual assaults of women prove that the Egyptians are beasts, and the one we'll be concerning ourselves with. Of course we support the Palestinians, but what about how sexist and homophobic they are? What's important for this discussion is 1, how it excludes trans people, and 2, how it has almost overtaken a place of the woman, or the woman question, which is to say trans is the new gay is the new woman. This is described as going from white men saving brown women from brown men in relation to the woman question to now the homosexual question is white gay men saving brown gay men from brown straight men. And the merging of these two questions happens from post-colonial states trying to prove their respectability to colonial powers. And also the homosexual question reproduces a demand for gender exceptionalism and relies on the continual reproduction of the gender binary, because the homosexuals being seen as treated properly by the nation state are not genderqueer. They're the ones recreating gender norms. Obscured by pinkwashing is how trans and gender nonconforming queers are not welcome in this new version of the proper homonationalist citizen. Another example of this is how when a certain city in a certain state that I'm not sure if I can say without getting heavily censored announced itself as the best gay city, at the same time prohibited the unification of West Bank Palestinians with their spouses. Pinkwashing thus works not only through an active portrayal of the Palestinian population as either homophobic or anti-homophobic, as the biopolitical target is arguably even more the control of heterosexual reproduction, especially between Palestinians and Israeli Jews. In the US, by prioritizing their acceptance within an unjust society, the normal gay rights movement helps sow the seeds that we're currently seeing grow. But there's also some queer resistance that's just as old as all this. With the rise of neo-Nazism and the rise of people identifying as queer, ironically, this history is tragically relevant. For the most part, the draconian anti-homosexual policies of the Third Reich have been passed over as an embarrassment or a triviality by most historians of the period. Nor were homosexual victims of Nazism given any official recognition. The post-war German government, which offered some monetary payment to former concentration camp inmates, excluded homosexuals from this restitution, as they were still officially criminals and their incarceration under the Nazi government was considered to have been fully justified. That is fucked. But the history of resistance is even more overlooked. You know that story about the suitcase bomb? Yeah, that was a case. Well, not exactly. They kinda inspired it. This is from Gay Resistance by Ian Young. Essentially, it's argued that the guy who made the assassination attempt was heavily inspired by the gays. Essentially, Stauffenberg was heavily inspired by a homosexual poet called Stephen Gay. Meanwhile, other gays formed resistance groups involved in several anti-Nazi attacks, including the dynamiting of many Nazi records offices. Work. There was a gay surrealist poet, Robert Desnos, also Dennis Rake, who was a female impersonator and also a secret agent. Work. Returning to my thesis. When I say trans is a new gay, I'm not saying that trans identity doesn't exist, or that these two are one and the same. What I am saying is that the social taboo and reaction to gay people has been slowly replaced by transphobia, as gay people have seemingly gained more societal acceptance. The transphobes of today are the homophobes of the past. The normal gay isn't just a meme. They're a function of power. In the US, one could argue there is a transnationalism developing, obviously by those who are white, binary, and passing, but that passing obviously comes at a cost. When I say trans is a new gay, the point I want to make is that this scapegoating of trans people is at our own expense.